Hey, Rock Youth, thanks for joining us for Teen Talk. We are in an awesome summer series called ID, looking at becoming who God created us to be. Last week, we discussed and studied around the idea that our identity is forged through struggle and how that works. And today, this week, we are going to study how our identity is forged through the relationships that we have in our life. All right. Well, relationships.
Yeah.
They definitely define who we are at different stages of our life. And so just wanted to kind of introduce that idea of really what it looks like and how it's personally affected our own lives.
Yeah.
And then what the scripture has to say about that so we can understand this principle as we head into this weekly reading plan to, see what the Bible actually has to say.
Right.
And show us about how relationships are defining who we are.
Right.
And so I think just kind of silly nature, have you ever been known as so-and-so's whatever, wife, brother?
Yeah, it changes. It's always changed with time, There's different seasons of your life. When I was younger, in middle school, I was known as, he's part of those kids that just annoy everybody and, think they're so cool. But
I know nothing about annoying people, not at all.
He's that guy. High school is known as the guy that hung out with the hillbillies that wasn't really hillbilly.
Hillbilly.
So, yep.
Okay. Right. I was in the surfer crowd-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in Florida. But I, early on in 6th grade, I got into the fishing, surfing, wakeboarding, boating crew.
Yeah.
And so they all had the wonderful, awesome bowl cut.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I remember the bowl cut.
So I got the bowl cut.
The bowl cut.
The relationship of wanting to be friends with these guys got me into having a bowl cut.
Yep.
And
that was like the mushroom.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With,
oh
the
yeah.
Split right
but you
down
do
the center.
You do the split. Yeah. You part your hair. Yep.
There's another name.
And then you
for
spend so much time in the sun, it gets sun bleached. And, you have white tips, and it looks like you have highlights. And yeah, that was my middle school years because I wanted to be friends with this group.
Okay.
So. Actually, we were watching some movie the other day, and some old guy came back in this guy's life, and he had the mullet. Remember?
Oh, the business in the front,
yeah,
and then party back here.
yeah. So he had the mullet, and he was I don't know, 65 years old or something with a mullet. And I'm like, Christy, when I'm 65, should I get the bowl cut back out?
The bowl cut?
She was like, no.
It might be coming back. You never know.
It could.
Things from our childhood are starting to become more popular.
Yeah. Okay. So these relationships, that's one that defined who I was.
Yeah.
And what I did, with that relationship, that group of friends. I started using profanity and fighting and went down just a terrible path.
Yeah.
And, it's just a demonstration of it happening. You said you were in the redneck, not redneck crew.
Skater, redneck crew is kind of split, between the two. But you would act differently between the two groups.
Right.
When I was with my skater friends, maybe I was more apt to use profanity and get into more trouble. Whereas if I'm hanging out with the hillbillies, I might just be out shooting things in the woods or whatever.
Right. Okay. Yeah, blowing things up.
That's what happens when you grow up in the cornfields.
Oh yeah.
Kind of confused.
Yeah. I think we all are at this age and this stage of life because, honestly, a lot of times we bounce between different groups, just trying to figure out where we
who do we want to
fit
be
in with.
Yeah. Who do we want to be? What do we want to be like? What is our identity going to be like?
Right.
What culture do I want to be a part of?
Right.
And it's this that exploratory phase.
I think a lot of you even do the same thing. You just even with church itself, in God, okay, let me check this thing out. Let me see, my friend or my girlfriend or my boyfriend's a part of it, and they believe in it maybe or something.
Yeah.
And so you come around for a time, and then you're like, yeah, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So our identity is definitely formed. I have that early relationship with Derek that drove me into bad places. I soon after that actually have a relationship with my youth pastor growing up.
Yeah.
That was very formative and changed the direction of my life for the positive, you know. And then I can think down just like different people, like that phase with my youth pastor actually started my relationship with Jesus. And so I started reading the Word, you know, and that was transformative in who I was.
Right.
And changed literally the direction of my life away from all of that.
Yeah.
You know, obviously my relationship with Christy and my wife now, but like dating her at 17 and like that changes the direction of my life.
Yeah.
And over, you look, like we were talking about this, you didn't realize like how many decisions your life is based on who you're following.
Yeah, you're, looking at it this way as you all embark on this and you kind of digest this and go through this reading plan, really think about it. But for us that have packed on a few more years, you're able to like kind of like really fine tune and look at where did I make these pinnacle moments that like started to change and forge my identity. And was my identity in the world, or was it with the Lord? And for you started forging your identity with the Lord, on that path.
Yeah, when I was
earlier on.
14.
Me, unfortunately, I made the choice not to, and I ingrained into the world further.
Right.
And just looking at those choices and scaling back, if I could have gone back a little bit.
Right.
And just maybe made a decision of hanging out with a different person or a different group.
Right. Right. And what we're going to see this week from the reading plan, and not going to read a lot because I want you guys to dig in and read yourself, but from the Matthew 7 passage, verse 24 says, "No one can serve two masters, for he will hate the one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money." And so he is giving an example of money here, but
anything.
You can interchange and put in things that you just idolize over God, anything that you put over God. And so here you see really that the principle that we're going to study this week is that your identity is forged in who you serve, who you follow. Jesus comes to what will be his disciples, says, "Come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." Like their identity became the disciples that we know, like that's their identity.
Yeah.
But it's because they followed Jesus. If they stayed, if Matthew stayed being a tax collector, you wouldn't know who he is.
Yeah, he would have been hated, continued to be hated by all the Jewish people, and
right.
Or Peter being a fisherman.
Yeah.
So they all had different professions.
Yeah, Luke was a doctor. Paul was a Pharisee.
Persecuting Christians.
Right, murdering Christians.
So you look at these identities of these men prior to them becoming disciples, and then the thing that we need to recognize is the fact that when Jesus said, "Come and follow me, I'll make you fishers of men," that's when their identity changed, and that's what we know them as. Right,
their identity changes, like what we know them as and think of them as, but also their friend group and who they spend time with changes.
Yeah.
If you actually study in the Gospels and you see who they were and where they were at, for 3 years while Jesus was on the earth, they spent their time as a group.
Yeah, they had fellowship with each other, to edify each other, and sharpen one another.
And they went out as a group, not individually, but they went out as a group or a group of two to share the gospel with lost people. But they didn't go out and hang out with lost people. Like they didn't just spend their time with lost people. Because one of the other passages we're going to study this week that is foundationally important to understand, and that is from, I don't write down where it's at, but the bad company corrupts good morals. I want to say it was in 1 Corinthians. Do you remember?
Yep, that's in 1 Corinthians.
Got it on the sheet, but 1 Corinthians 15:33 and 34. And we just see the importance for us to surround ourselves with good friends. Yeah, it says in verse 33, "Don't be fooled by those who say such things, for bad company corrupts good character. Think carefully about what is right and stop sinning. For to you, your shame, I say that some of you don't know God at all." So Paul is pretty bold here.
It's pretty clear, like, it's a bold statement.
First of all, he says bad company corrupts good morals. So don't spend your time with people that will pull you down. And then just gets bold and says, sadly, some of you don't even know God at all. You're just pretending you're here, maybe seeking what this identity of Christ is and what it's like to be a Christian. But your relationship isn't, I'm following Christ. It's just like, I'm hanging out with a crowd of Christians. You know, and that's a very different thing that people do.
Well, yeah, you have to ask yourself, do people see my identity as like just that hypocritical Christian that's claiming to be a Christian that's not a Christian? Or do people see your identity as a Christ follower?
Right.
Like, and that's the difference between the two.
Because what you'll see is that, I mean, I got the opportunity to preach in Wes's Place just recently.
Yeah.
And in John chapter 7, he says that, you know, they will hate me because I call out their evil deeds and their evil motives, you know. And so the thing that will or should happen, if you are being a light in a dark place, so if you are being a Christ follower in a dark world of sin, they're going to hate you.
Yeah.
And that friendship won't continue.
It's sharper than a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
It says. Cuts through.
And that becomes like almost a gauge of showing us whether we're just hanging out with lost people or being a Christ follower with lost people. Because people are going to feel uncomfortable when they're with us.
Right.
If we're actually being a light in their life. If we're just hanging out, being buddies, you know, they'll have no problem because we're not calling out their sin.
Right.
You know, by the way that we live and the word of God that we teach to them and share with them. You know, and so when I think about this principle of identity being forged through relationships in our life, it's something that we'll definitely see in the reading plan this week.
Yeah.
You're going to see both positive and negative, you know, like people who had good relationships forged good things, and people like, you know, Satan and Eve and Adam in the garden, like that, you know, she had a relationship she wanted with Satan, and that was a bad one, you know, and it led to where we're all at today,
right,
in sin. And so we really have to think about that principle that we see in 1 Corinthians 15 that says bad company corrupts good morals.
Absolutely.
You know, and so throughout this week, as you dig into the reading plan, I want to challenge you to really think about your life. Think about, you know, however long it is. If you're a 6th grader, you're a 12th grader, or you're a parent, it doesn't really matter. Think back through your life and say, you know, what were some relationships that like forged who I am at different stages of our life? Because we can look back and I can go to a 6th grade friend, a youth pastor, Jesus himself, my wife, our relationship. You know, I have another guy, Jason, who just like gave me some wisdom and direction on what it means to be a dad. You know, my relationship with Wes has like defined a lot of who I am as a pastor and a preacher.
Right.
You know, like I can look back and these relationships keep kind of course correcting or redirecting and
absolutely
throwing me off, you know.
So all of you have an opportunity to dig into this and really analyze it as you're going through it and to make the decision of how do I want my identity to be? Like, do I want it to be, you know, who am I going to associate myself with?
Right.
You know, is it going to be with people that bring about bad things, or is it going to be with Jesus? So,
Right. And so with that, you know, we'll see from the reading plan, get in, read it, but really ask yourself, who are you following? How has that, like, you know, identified who you are as a person? And then ultimately, you know, who are we supposed to follow? It's God. You know, we can only serve one master. Actually, one of my other favorite verses from this reading today is in Galatians. And it was Galatians 1:6.
It's 1:10. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be a Christ servant.
Right. And so I think you can stick in there for people 2 different things. One is friends or like people.
Yeah.
And 2 is yourself as people. Like, am I trying to...
Am I serving myself?
Am I trying to serve myself?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I trying to serve God?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in this uncomfortable teenage years, we're trying to figure out who we are, and we begin to follow and serve these other people, but it's really to make ourselves feel good.
We hear that a lot in society. You worry about you.
Yeah.
Concentrate on you.
Yeah, and we're here to serve and love God. He created us, gave us a purpose, and we are to seek that purpose with our life, And so I would just challenge you really to dig into the reading plan. We also have, if you're in our app or you don't have our app, you can go download the Rock Church Fenton app, and you can find the discussion questions. And so I'd love for you to watch these, read the Bible reading plan, and then answer the discussion questions. Find yourself a journal, begin to write down, what God is teaching you. And then, join us again on Friday, as we're going to just spend some time talking about what we learned while we were doing this reading plan ourselves.
Yeah, there's some great examples and stories that show both sides of this.
Yeah.
Try to relate and plug yourself into those stories to see if, how do you compare to them?
If you were in Eve's situation, or you were in Adam's situation, or
you'll see Ruth, Jonah, things like that. So
thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on Friday for our next Teen Talk.